This is a production of Cornell University.
All right, so we think about what we're going to be adding fertilizer. Okay, first we figured out what we need, and then we figure out how we're going to apply it, okay, or what we're going to use to apply it. Now we actually have to think about, well, I've got my nutrients that I need. I actually can use some techniques to improve their efficiency or their effectiveness, okay? The biggest one is timing. When I apply my fertilizer, okay, I know my plants are going to need X amount. But if I put X amount in the beginning of the crop's life cycle, those plants are not going to get X. If it's nitrogen, it's going to be leached away or volatilized. And by the time the plants actually need it, they're not going to get it. So you have to actually think about when you're putting it on. And this is where this combination of doing slow release versus fast release. Okay? I use slow release fertilizers, whatever the source is, to basically meet the baseline needs of the plant. And then at certain periods of the plant's life, when it needs a boost or it has more demand for X fertilizer, for X nutrient I should say, that's when you go in and you side dress with that fertilizer. Does that make sense? Yes, no, kind of? All right, I'm running out of board space. Think about this. Okay, my plant response is like this. Now this is time, okay, and this is yield, okay? Generally, this is what we think about plants. This is how they grow, right? The reality is this is not necessarily a smooth line, okay? Because right in here, they're doing flowering, okay? Right in here, they're doing seed set or whatever it happens to be. Which means from a nutrient sense, this line, if I'm going to parallel this line, this is going to be nutrients though. I don't have a different color, okay? Generally, if this is the lifestyle of my plant, this is what you would think the nutrient needs are. As the plant gets bigger, it's going to need more nutrients, right? No. In general, that may be true, but right around here, it potentially needs a spike of something. It's going to have more demand for something, okay? If that's the case, I'm going to have a spike of nutrients right about there. And right about here, it's going to have another demand for something extra. Okay? So as a result, I'm going to have another spike. I need to time my application based on where my plant is in its life cycle. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah? Okay, that's what they're talking about here when they talk about timing. Okay, now, let's think about how we're actually going to deliver. Okay? It's all well and good for me to say, hey, you need to get some nitrogen out there when it's going in through fluorescence or something like that. But how you actually get it out there, that's another consideration. Okay? We have a number of different methods that you guys should be familiar with. Broadcast, injection or banding, and banding. Soluble, it's coming in through liquid sources, or a foliar spray. Okay? Now, each one of these methods basically has some serious advantages as well as some serious disadvantages. Okay, let's start with broadcast. Broadcast is basically you're literally just sort of spreading it out there. Okay, old pictures of farming in Europe and Asia where you can see people broadcasting seed and stuff like that. That's what this means. Okay, its advantages: it's really fast. It's easy to do this, and it's really convenient. It doesn't take a lot of equipment to do this. The problem with this is that if I'm doing this, I'm not necessarily guaranteed that those nutrients are going to where the plants are. Okay, so it may be poor nutrient accessibility, okay, as well as if I'm broadcasting it on the surface, if I don't have good soil contact, that stuff isn't actually going to get into the soil very quickly, okay. And then finally, if I have like an ammonium source, I'm spreading out ammonium, or if this stuff volatilizes through decomposition or whatever, it's not going down to the roots. Does that make sense? Okay, next one is injection banding. Okay, this one really deals a lot with this issue of volatilization. Basically, I'm reducing the soil interactions. I'm putting the nutrients as close to the roots as possible, so I don't have to have that cation exchange. You guys remember when a nutrient goes into soil solution, it potentially can be interacted with another soil solid, Okay, and it slowly makes its way to the root. Well, the closer I put that fertilizer to the root, the less distance it has to travel. Does that make sense? Okay. Because there's less distance and because I've injected it below ground, I have reduced volatilization. Okay. Now, the problem with this one, there's two problems with this one. Big disadvantage, if I get these nutrients too close to the roots, I potentially will get salt issues and toxicity. Okay. The other big advantage of this one is that often you have to have certain kinds of equipment. Okay. The next one is a soluble, okay, where the nutrient is in soluble form, so I can deliver it with water. Okay, my irrigation. You know, whatever I'm watering with, there goes the nutrients. And the nutrients are moving through mass flow, which makes the delivery of the nutrients a lot easier to get to the roots. Right? Make sense? Okay. And because it's a soluble form, I can really control the application rates. I can put the concentration I want in that water, and it will deliver that amount with that water to that plant. Make sense? Okay. Issue here is a couple. One is this is pretty bulky. It's concentrated. You got to have the equipment to do the mixing. You obviously have to have an irrigation control. Okay, and there's cost. This stuff is fairly expensive. This is like buying Miracle-Gro. Has anybody gone to the the Agway or something like that and looked at the prices of Miracle-Gro versus a dried fertilizer? It's pretty expensive stuff. Okay. Last one, and we don't really do this a lot around here, but it is done a fair bit, is basically foliar sprays. Okay, where you're literally spraying, instead of putting it on the ground, you're literally spraying it onto the, as a spray onto the plants. Okay, generally because it's going right onto the plant, there's a fast response. And because you're doing the spraying, you get really accurate timing. You don't have to deal with the soil immobilization. Okay, the nutrient goes in the soil, it's got to go through those cation exchange complexes if it's not going through mass flow. All right, so you don't lose that potential nutrient delivery at the timing that you want it to be. Now the problem with this is it rains in the world. And if it rains in the world, you know what's going to happen to that stuff if it's a foliar spray. It's going to get washed off the plant and down into the soil, which puts you right back to probably this sense up here. Okay, depending upon my plant architecture, it rains through. I'm going to have through flow. The stuff's going to be falling off. Now, potentially I also get stem flow, so I'll have some concentration around my stem, but question?
What are the plant uptake like through leaves versus roots? Like it seems like.
Okay, so the question is, what is the plant uptake in foliar sprays or leaves versus roots? There is a limitation in what types of nutrients that you can do. But I can't speak that much on it. I don't know a lot. I mean, I don't know a lot about the actual the mechanism that the plants take that in. There is a limitation on the types of roots, and there's a limitation on the amount of concentration that you can put in as the spray. But other than that, that's sort of the limitation of my knowledge on that one. Okay? Questions? Any other questions on this one? No? All right. So what does this actually look like? This is out of your book just to give you guys an idea. So broadcasting on the surface, you can certainly just sort of spread it out there. Often when people do that, they will then integrate it, plow it down some way, so that it gets into the soil. Again, you're still going to have this specificity issue, but you can see, depending on how you disc it or mold or plow it, you can definitely put this stuff in different locations in your soil. Banding at planting time, you're basically putting in sort of like a tube applicator, and you're basically putting the fertilizer down here. The plants will then move to it. You put it as close to the roots as possible. Deep injection or point injection. Point injection is basically a series of deep injections, basically a blade which with basically a plastic pipe behind it that it sort of injects stuff as the blade cuts through. Fairly simple. It's fairly similar to the banding. In banding, though, you're basically creating cut, drop the stuff in, and then cover it. In this case, you're basically just cutting through and not recovering because the soil is just basically sealing itself back up. Drip irrigation type of step where you're actually putting in soluble fertilizer into the liquid system. Now, this is a drip system, but this could also be coming in as a flood system or a bath system or something like that. Okay? And then the foliar spray is literally what you think it is. It's like you're going out there with a spray can or spray apparatus. Okay? Cool beans? All right.
This has been a production of Cornell University, on the web at cornell.edu.